Thanks, Jennifer. We like to recap our mission, our purpose, our vision, why we're all here. We're thrilled to have everybody here today. Our mission is to inspire and challenge leaders to drive sustainable change. That's what we all try to do every day, and that's what we try to do as an organization by inspiring others. And our purpose is to serve as stewards of a globally recognized standard of excellence in change management and offer members a professional community of networking, collaboration, and professional development. That's our purpose, and that's what we aim for. So just to start us off, from 4:30 until 6, assuming everybody's in Central Time Zone, we're going to start with some announcements, and then we will have our discussion, our presenter, Change Must Change. Stay tuned, watch the chat at the end. We'll be asking for feedback on this summit, and then stick around. At the end, we'll have about a half hour of debriefing, talking, and continuing the conversation that we started with Brett, and maybe some more soup recipes from John. So let's start with some announcements. Somebody from our programming committee around? I'm not sure if anybody from program.
Sorry, Nancy, I just literally got on.
That's okay. Thanks, Nancy.
Yeah, so next month, we're going to have a guest speaker, Michael Sonneborg. He's going to talk to us about avoiding burnout during change. So that will be exciting to have him present to us next month. And then we got all sorts of other things that we're teeing up down the road. So if anybody has any ideas they want to share about topic suggestions, please send them over. Thank you.
Right. Any questions, any ideas, you send to office@mncmn.org. And how about somebody from our professional development committee talk about ProSci certification?
Well, this is Jeff Hudson. I'm not sure if there's anybody else from professional development on here, but I can go ahead and talk about that one. Coming up in August 10th through the 12th, we have special member pricing, and it is a virtual program. As of yesterday, we had 6 people registered, so we still have room for at least 4 more. And it's one of the big benefits of membership.
Yeah, good to see you, Jeff. Thanks for jumping in.
You too.
It's like riding a bike, isn't it? Jeff used to be on our board and do these announcements with us. So ProSci certification, special pricing for members. If you haven't gotten ProSci certified, this is the time.
And Emily, something to note related to ProSci. So I got certified back in 2012. So I kind of I need to dust it back off again, probably. But what I'm hearing from my colleagues internally at my client right now is that ProSci, and I'm seeing it from ProSci themselves. Tim Creasy has a webinar coming up about it, but they've been making some slight modifications to what you learn in ProSci certification. So if that isn't another incentive to kind of be interested in what they have to offer, I don't know what is. So they're definitely seeing value in changing. Maybe it goes along with what Brett's going to talk about today, but changing their methodology or evolving their methodology, particularly from what's been learned from this past year and so forth. So
that's a really good point, Tanya. I'm glad you brought that up, because one of the things we're talking about in professional development is the possibility of bringing in a sort of a short supplemental course that ProSci offers for people who have been certified under the older methodology, just to kind of bring people up to speed on what some of the changes are.
Thank you. Tonya, do you want to, sorry, this was going over to Shannon.
I'm going to do it. Yes.
Shannon.
Well, first of all, I just want to say I'm so excited to be on the membership committee. We're going to do so many cool things this year and some surprise events. And so we can't wait to tell you more about that when they get fully baked. But welcome, Suzanne and Tina, Jeanette, Sarah, Tina, again, another Tina, Carla, Susan, Michelle, Denise, and Tara. Thank you so much for joining us. This is going to be great. We also have a new member orientation on August 11th. It's a lunch meeting. And as a member, you get access to all of our summits, our Thursday summits. This is one of them. You also get to invite 2 guests to these summits. We can't wait to see who those guests are, and this opportunity to network. So please email us if you have any questions at that office at MnCMN.org email address, or either of these. Welcome.
Great, and let me hand this then over to Nancy. Are you able to introduce Brett for us, and then we'll get this show on the road? If not, I will.
Sorry, sure.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Right. So Brett came to us through a recommendation from one of our members. So we're really appreciative about that. And he is a leading HR executive, or he helps HR executives through transformation, one strategy at a time. So he's going to help us understand what he does for SAP's customers when they're going through a big transformation, and help us understand what his message is to his customers around change. So Brett, thank you so much. Glad you're here, and take it away.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate it. And I really appreciate you having me. I look forward to having some fun. As you can tell, I'm an introvert. I don't like to be shy. I'm very shy, anyways, I'll keep going. So let me share some of my screen here, if I may, and then we can get going. Is this yes, this is it. It's funny when you go from Zoom to Teams to Google back to Teams again, and all of these things. So I think you're seeing my desktop. There we go. Nope, that's a roadmap for a customer. We don't want that one. Let's see. Here, I see it down. Here we go. Why can't it drive? There we go. All right. Let me put it in projection mode. Oh, you know what it's doing? It swapped over to my iPad. Hold on one second. There we go. Is that better?
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
Awesome. So just because I work at one of the largest technology in the companies in the world does not mean I'm a technology expert. Let's just set that stage. So thank you guys for having me. I think is it Jeannie Heald? I think Jeannie's the one who made the recommendation. So thank you, Jeannie. And we really appreciate, I appreciate you reaching out to me and the team and inviting me here, and Emily and Nancy and all you guys for the warm welcome. It's been great. So, one of the things I want to share today, outside of my background, is a little bit about what we're experiencing at SAP from a change management perspective. You guys saw a little bit about my background. I'll give you the 10-second cursory overview. I'm the global vice president, head of our customer transformation organization. And basically what that means is that myself and my organization engage with our customers for one simple vision, and that's to accelerate their transformation to the cloud. And so one of the interesting things about my organization is that we're not technical experts. We actually focus on everything around the technology. So working with our customers to define their strategy, helping them set up governance models, helping them think through what their change management approach is, having them think about what's the future structure that they need, the skills, the capabilities. The technology is an enabler and an influencer of all this, but ultimately, transformation is really rooted in our people. So I say that because change is part of my day-to-day life, right? I mean, regardless of what conversation that I'm having with whatever executive that might be, change is always a component of what we do and where our customers are trying to go. So a few months ago, I was asked to present at a ASUB conference, which is the American Society of I don't remember what it is, something of whatever, it doesn't matter. SAP User Group, I'm sorry, American SAP User Group. And one of the concepts we were talking about was change management. And the whole root of this concept of change must change was, I really started doing some reflection, not only back on my career at SAP for 7 years, my 15 plus years of leading global transformations, working in HR and leading HR for all of these years. And one thing that really jumped out to me around change is that we talk about it a lot, but we don't really execute it very well. And the other piece of that is that, when we really look at some of the core concepts, and I'm excited to hear that ProSci is looking to start shifting their approach and methodology, is that, listen, we've been talking about stakeholder analysis and impact analysis and engagement approaches and communication plans and training plans and sustainment plans and reinforcement plans for, I don't know, 50, 60 years, right? And one of the common things that we continue to hear from our customers is that, frankly, it's not the approach of change. It doesn't matter if it's a ProSci, it doesn't matter if it's an ADCAR, it doesn't matter if it's your own process and approach. It really comes down to having that right level of mindset, setting those expectations, and really reinforcing those behaviors that you need. Now, all of the change concepts that we deliver on a day-to-day basis that you deliver definitely play a role in making those things happen. But one of the key common denominators that you'll see is that change, and you guys know this, change is hard. And our customers are really struggling with it. And so what I wanted to do first, before I dive into some of the content, is really share with you a couple things that we're seeing across our customer base. And just to kind of level set, let me back up a little bit. If you guys don't know who SAP is, we are, I think, the second largest technology company in the world that's business to business. We are a competitor of Oracle. We have products across every line of business that you can think of. And not only do we design and develop these software, we also implement them and all of these other things. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that. But point is that, we have thousands and thousands and millions of users that we are trying to get to not only adopt our solution, but really start changing the way that organizations work. And so when I started looking back, and my area of focus primarily is within our HXM, or what we call human experience management or HR area. My team engages with something like 600, 700, 800 customers, unique customers every year. And so one of the things that we do is we try to do some pulse analysis on those customers to really understand where they're struggling across these various pillars of transformation. And so one of those pillars, of course, is change management. So I wanted to provide you some quick themes that we're hearing and talk a little bit about them, and then dive into some content in terms of where we're really starting to push our customers to think differently and really look at how they need to change the way that they change. So the first is, and this is a global survey, just so you guys know, but actually within global, this was also has a regional breakdown. And every customer, right, that we assessed said that change management is the #1 risk of meeting their transformation objectives. So Emily, I think it was you, or so one of you guys asked in the very beginning, are there any leads or opportunities? Yes, there's thousands of them, right? Which leads into some of these next few pieces, right? I mean, our customers struggle with change, and they're hiring external contractors in daily to support these things. So do I have necessarily all the visibility and all the open positions in those areas? No, I don't, but it's desperately a need, right? The second thing is that change has been identified as being the lowest maturity area across our SAP SuccessFactors customers. So again, this is a product line for HR. Now, I would also say that in some of our other assessments, it has either been the lowest or almost the lowest in some of these other business areas as well. The other interesting thing, if you look at number 3, which is actually extremely scary, is that change management also has been identified as having the biggest gap in capabilities from an organizational standpoint to meet their current to future state maturity. So again, if we think about this, our customers are rating themselves as a -1. They want to be a 10, right? Across all these other transformational areas, again, the key identifier, this is a significant gap in their ability to be successful. The fourth core thing, which I also, and this completely baffles me, the 4, 5, and 6, because one of the things we typically go in and talk about is, you know, from a transformational perspective, and you guys know this if you've run projects, right? One of the key requirement to any successful project is people, right? It's the right people experience, the skills, their capabilities, having the right number of people. And time again, will I walk in and I'll ask the question around change management gaps, and I'll say, let's talk about how your change management is structured, right? What are the programs of change management that you're driving? How many resources do you have? And I'm talking about massive transformations with anywhere from 50 to 150,000 employees. And this person says, well, we've got one person managing change across the globe, right? I mean, that just, to me, that's just staggering. Which ties into the next piece, is very often that one person has zero change management experience. They've never managed change. They've never gone through any type of certification or any course, but we're just literally plucking someone off the bench and saying, you are now our change leader, you know, drive our executives, drive executive sponsorship, you know, gather our stakeholders, get them on board, get them aligned, get our communication, get them trained. And if you think about this, you know, frankly, we are setting ourselves up, not we as SAP, our customers are setting themselves up for failure, frankly, before they even start. And the other piece, I didn't put this on here, but this kind of ties into these, is that I would probably say that out of all of our customer engagements, right, 60 to 75% of the time, we get called in a month before go live, right? Which is just, we're pushing the system out to our users and saying, can you help us with change management? No one's thinking about how to start it early, right? And then, you know, it's just baffling. And then I think the last piece of this, the other big trend around is, you know, most of them think it's a very tactical project and not a strategic initiative. And, you know, I think we've all had the phrase, listen, change doesn't end at go live, whatever go live means, whether it's live and going live on a new process, a system, whatever that might be. And again, if you take a step back, and we can talk about this when I'm done, but you know, just kind of think to yourself, out of these 6 or 7 points, how frequently this happens, right? And there's a reason for this. And that's really what I want to spend most of my time on today, is really talking about the rationale behind why companies aren't investing their time and energy and resources and capabilities and money into the change piece, right? And I think we all maybe take a jump and say, we don't have sponsorship, or they don't understand, and all of these things. But I actually think there's more to it than this. And really where I think that takes us, let me figure out how to switch my screen here. I think that really takes us to one common denominator, which is commitment. And I've been thinking about this for a lot, and is that I engage with customers very early on, sometimes before they've even purchased our solution or started even thinking about their transformation. You know, I often ask some very probing questions around, their readiness, not only their own readiness, that their executives clearly understand what's happening. Do they understand what's going to happen to their employees? What have we done to start socializing this? Are we getting them engaged? All of these other things. And what's interesting is if you think about the term commitment, and I'm not going to read this because you can, but there's a one word that jumps out to me, and this is really about being dedicated to something. And I feel that, like, when I'm dedicated to something, I'm willing to invest my time, my energy, my resources, which could be people or financially, right? I'm willing to commit and put forth the effort to really start driving and putting myself out there to ensure success. And so as we think about our customers or your customers or your organization, this to me is one question that I'm starting to ask every customer from day one is, what is your level of commitment for making this successful? And we hear, hey, listen, our leaders have bought in. The first time they say they bought in, I say you've lost. Buy-in is a purchasing decision. It's not a commitment to engage or to a commitment to provide those resources. And when they say, hey, we got the sponsorship, well, what does that mean? Right. And this is a really good opening question to start probing into some of this. So I actually want to put this to the test, right? And I'm going to put this to the test with you guys. And I'm going to ask you a question, actually 2 questions. So how many of you made a New Year's resolution this year? Hopefully it was not get sick or get back to work or, whatever it might be. And how is your progress against that New Year's resolution? And again, that could be, I want to learn how to fly. I want to learn how to fish. I want to learn how to cook. There's lots of New Year's resolutions out there. So we don't have to answer it, right? But I just want you to kind of think about it, right? Did I make a New Year's resolution? How am I proceeding against this New Year's resolution? And I'm just going to give you guys about 5 seconds to just think about it. Because I know I made one. So let's see how people are doing. And so the question is, as we think about our own level of commitment, and what's interesting about the question about New Year's resolution is again, as I was thinking about this, I was trying to feel, how do we bring this back to life? And this study was really fascinating to me, where it said only 25% of those who make New Year's resolutions successfully carry their resolutions past the first week of January, right? And only a mere 8% of successful in achieving their goals. Now, for those of you who have gone to the ProSci site or have Googled successful change management programs, it also says something like 75% of transformations, including the change management approach, well, actually 75% of transformations fail when they don't have a clear change management approach. Now, the correlation is very loose, but my point in bringing this is, what we're saying here is that we have a desire to start working out. We have a desire to get fit. We have a desire to learn new things. The reality is are we really committed to doing those? And listen, I didn't make this study up, but how do you translate this into your own organization? Listen, I have a desire to implement a new software. I have a desire to implement new processes. I have a desire to expand my business model. I have a desire to do all of these things. But the reality is, how many of them actually come to fruition? And this is the same thing as it relates to change, right? Organizations have a desire to change, but the reality is, unless they're putting in the time, I'm getting up at 5 a.m., I'm going to the gym, I'm eating better, right? I'm doing this, I'm doing that. I'm putting the time, the energy, my commitment into making something successful. And that really, guys, is the bottom line problem and why change must change. It has to come back to this commitment. And commitment is really interesting, And when we start breaking this down, right, commitment from my perspective is really based on three things. It's mindset, expectations, and behaviors. And I had mentioned that earlier. What's interesting about this is, everyone talks about having a new mindset. Mindset is the most difficult thing that you can change. Whether it's your political beliefs, whether it's your religious beliefs, whether it's the type of food, we all have a certain mindset that we are stuck on. And when you look at a mindset from an organizational perspective, this is a cultural thing, right? The most cultures are top down, right? There are some instances where cultures have been bottom up. We're seeing that a lot more based on the hybrid working and remote working and how people need to interact and engage and all of these things differently. But the reality is that mindset ultimately, from an organizational perspective, is a cultural piece. And so how do we take an organization that's been doing something for 30 years and say, nope, you got to stop. We're now going to do it this way. Now, there could be compelling reasons for this. Maybe they need to grow globally. Maybe there's competitive differentiation they need to meet. Maybe it's based on industry, right? If there's a compelling event, maybe it's financial, right? There's some triggers, there's some pokers that get these organizations to move. But really, do they have that level of mindset? And this is really where we have to start, right? And this isn't just about gaining executive alignment and gaining executive sponsorship. This is about changing the culture and changing the way it works. So from mindset, we move to then expectations, right? And expectations is really around defining what it is that you need to do in the future. How do we work differently? Who do we work differently with? Do we work somewhere else? Do we have new customers, new clients, right? Are we interacting differently? What are the expectations that we're setting to drive these level of expectations? And again, if we don't have this mindset, we're never even going to get to setting expectations. And then the last piece around this is really thinking about our behaviors. Our behaviors are actually putting our expectations into action. It's how we work. Now, what's interesting, so let's kind of play this scenario out. We hear this all the time, right? We've gone through this implementation. We've gone through this transformation. We've gone through this change, right? We've got the executive sponsorship. We've brought in our stakeholders. We've engaged them. We've trained them. We've communicated with them. But you know what? We just can't get them to adopt the way we want them to adopt. Why is that? Why? What is the resistance? We can blame it on understanding. We can blame it on training. We can blame it on this. We can blame it on that. But the reality is it ultimately comes back to the fact that we didn't do a good enough job in changing what that mindset needs to be. And again, unfortunately, if you think about the example that I said, one person's not going to do that, right? This will take, this has to be a groundswell. This has to be, hundreds of people coming together with a common vision, looking at common objectives to say, this is the way we have to work differently, and this is how we have to work differently to actually make this happen. So let's kind of put this into practice a little bit, and let's talk about really each one of these areas and how we start thinking about making this overall shift. So as I said, the focus on mindset is really around having clear sponsorship and setting a direction. Now, here's what's interesting, is I often find that when we go in and we say we've got the sponsorship, and then I go talk to an executive and I say, what is that strategic direction they're trying to achieve or the goals that they're trying to meet? Very often they can't answer those questions. So the term sponsorship has to be more than a handshake. It has to be more than just a pat on the back, a stamp of their approval, right? It's really about them clearly understanding the inner workings of what the strategy, the vision, and the goals are. Because if we don't understand that, right, they can't articulate that. And therefore, we can't help set the expectations and the behaviors of what the future is. Now, great example. right? So when we think about Uber has come out, right? I mean, years ago, how many people were resistant about taking an Uber? Everyone was used to getting into a cab. No one wanted to use the app, right? It was very uncomfortable. We didn't know who we were getting. Do we trust them? Do we not trust them? Some people have had good experiences. Some people have bad experiences. But the reality is that we as a culture, right, started to look at how we live differently, same way as how we work differently. This started to become a common practice. The more people started doing it, the more value it started driving. But we also understood, frankly, the whole purpose behind what Uber was trying to do, right? Which was try to move people from one place to another in a more efficient and effective manner to give you a better experience. If I didn't understand that and someone just, hey, download this Uber app and some random car was going to come pick you up, I probably not sure if I would have done it. So then really moving on to the next piece is around setting these expectations. And I kind of touched on these earlier. You know, setting these expectations is really being clear about what we need from you. And I think today's world is so crazy right now when we think of everything that we've gone through. And I'm not using the pandemic as an excuse. I'm actually using it as an opportunity. You know, and I think some organizations did a really great job at helping reframe and set expectations of how we interact, how we engage, how we work, all of these things differently during this time. But we also have to think about some of the initiatives we're trying to drive. Maybe they're not as big. And are we really doing a good job very early on setting the expectations with the managers, with the people, around what that future looks like in terms of maybe it's new skills, new capabilities, new processes. They may not need to know the ins and outs at this point, but are they really clear on what we're asking them to do? Versus we go through this big transformation process or whatever it might be, and then we get to the end and we say, surprise, here's your training, now we expect you to go do it. It's never going to work. But that's really the reality in most organizations. And then lastly is around establishing those new behaviors, which come back to really the last two, which is the continuous reinforcement and measuring the business value. Experience is actually, I would say, kind of a blend between the expectations, but the behaviors are also really the value that we're getting around and about from the expectations, I should say. So how do we know we did good? You know, and again, even those organizations who I have found do a great job at managing change. When I ask them at the end, it says, how do you know you've been successful? Well, we went live. Well, that doesn't really tell me a measure of success. That just tells me you achieved a milestone in terms of your journey. How do you know your people are adopting? Well, they're using the tool. Well, honestly, using the tool doesn't equal adoption. It just means they don't have anything. They don't have another place to do what they were going to do. It's really a forced change. So again, as we think about these concepts, right, I don't think any of these are new, right? I just think it's really around how do we package this a little bit different, right? How do we start looking at our change management approach to really simplify it down to these three areas versus coming in with this overcomplicated process that frankly no one understands and no one wants to follow because they have 100 other things to do. So the last slide I wanted to share with you, and then I'm going to wrap it up and open it up for questions because I'd like this to be some open dialogue. It's really a model that my organization and I built as we really started looking at kind of the difference between this commitment and non-commitment within organizations. And we use this a lot with our customers to help them start thinking about engaging their process along the change journey. You guys might have seen something like this or whatever, but what's interesting is, again, as we come in and very often we'll start seeing very early on, business disconnect is a challenge. There's competing priorities. There's business confusion. No one understands what's going on. And you can directly correlate that back to not having any commitment. Right? I mean, it's pretty obvious. Whereas if we really start looking at that commitment and we really start looking at those organizations who are investing their time, their energy, their people, their money, whatever it might be, we start seeing a very different journey, right? We see a very clear journey. We see a journey of people actually wanting to help. We see a journey of people wanting to start consuming very early. We see journeys of people starting to pilot things and getting people excited about things. But I think the bottom line is ultimately we see a journey that accomplishes some objectives. And I think as we really start taking and paring back, everything we do from a change management perspective, ultimately, we all are trying to accomplish the same thing, which is some sort of end state. The challenge is we all go about it very differently, but we're not going to go about it at all, or we're going to fail very early if we don't have that level of commitment from not only our organization, from our overall people. So that's all I had. I think I had one more slide, but that was a quote that I had put in here. I'll just pull up. Oops, can't get my button. There it goes. So basically, and I think I may have actually said this, so this was my profound moment of the year, but we can no longer be complacent with our common approaches. We must evolve our change practices to make them meaningful and results driven. So Emily or team, I'm going to hand it back over to you, and let's open it up. Let's have some questions, if that works for you guys. Nancy, can I stop sharing? Do you mind? So I can look in your eyeballs.
You can stop sharing if you wish. So
I give presentations every day, so I try to keep things short and simple because I know you guys are PowerPointed to death. So that's why I figured we'd have a little chat, if that works for you.
That's great. So if anybody has a question, if you go into your toolbar, there's an icon that says reactions. When you click on that, you see a raise hand icon. If you have a question, go ahead and raise your hand using the icon in your tray. I guess I put this in the chat earlier, but those 6 points, those 6 insights are just so, they're so right on. I felt seen, and these are the ideas that I'm always trying to convey to sponsors and to organizations that I work with who are going through some sort of transformation. It really resonated. So thank you for saying it so succinctly.
Well, it's scary, to be honest. I mean, it's just completely, it baffles me, and here's the problem we all on this call probably are very passionate about change. I think that's why we're here. And I think we all want to make sure that our change initiatives are successful. But the reality is that we really don't control the outcome. That outcome comes back to other things. And it's disappointing, right? When you see all of these things and say, I can help influence them. I can't really do anything about it.
Yeah.
I'd be interested in getting your point of view. And so how many of you actually made a New Year's resolution and how many of you didn't achieve it or dropped it?
I stopped making New Year's resolutions. This is the first year I didn't because I felt like such a failure every other year. And so I was like, nope, not doing it this year. Too much pressure. I knew I didn't have the commitment.
John, you had
I stopped.
Yeah, I did raise my hand. So thank you for I agree with Emily that the 1 through 6, I really enjoyed those. I think number 6 is number 1, and you actually shared how number 6 is number 1 in your last slide. Goes to a point that I wanted to kind of ask you about. First, I want to compliment, I used to work for Medtronic. There were a couple of SAP people to help us out. They knew I was a change guy, and they were incredibly supportive of like, we got to work with him. No. This is what, that's what they do. Okay, so thank you for coaching your team. The one thing though that we did in Medtronic in my area, very, very big company, and this little big part, is that we developed a charter. And the charter basically, remember your last slide with the green path and the red
Mhm.
path? We said, okay, here's your points of your green path that you're eventually going to have to do. And I was always nagging at them, you got to change your mindset. I didn't use those language
Yeah.
terms because, you know, a business person mindset. I didn't take out Dweck's book and say, let's open chapter 4. You know, I didn't go down that path, you know, so that's nice. But I'm wondering, and that's the discussion I'd like to do. What we did was we actually had a document. They had to sign off and a few other people sign off, including sponsors and a few other key people that talked about resources, how much, how big, how this, how that. And we negotiated the charter. And if they didn't sign the charter, we then, because there was something wrong, we actually had addendums and saying, okay, you're choosing the risk for this because you didn't do that. But I would turn
Yeah.
to my sponsor and go like, do you really realize what you're signing up for? And 90% of the time it was no. It was my job to get them to say yes. But I'm wondering, do other people
Yeah.
use like more of a formal document to basically set the stage? Because you really didn't say that, Brett. I was wondering if SAP kind of comes in, you talk to it, and you were so close to saying, and then I'm gonna have them sign this son of a gun, right? So how do you make sure that you get that type of, either whether you call it a charter or project or whatever, how do you do that, Brett? How have you seen it work and not work?
Well, I think the interesting point about that is the answer is yes, right? But I don't think what they're actually signing is what they think they're signing, right? Again, I mean, they're signing a charter to implement a software,
Yeah.
right? They're not signing a paper to be willing to commit to all of these things, right? To engage certain resources, to, you know, invest certain time and energy. And it's funny, I was actually with a customer not with them, but on the phone with their CHRO, and I was having a conversation with him, and I said, and you know what, here are the things you need to do during the change. And they looked at me like I was crazy.
Yep.
And I'm like, and I got off the phone and they're like, why did you tell our CHRO? I said, well, clearly you haven't, you know.
Yep.
And it's like, what do you expect him just do it? No, they don't know, right? And but
Yep.
yeah, so it's interesting. So I find, John, and this is so troubling, is that change management in most of our customers is managed so loosely,
Yeah.
right? That there is not a formal structure. Now, when we come in and work with customers, and again, we've got tons of customers. My team's very small. We can't handle them all.
Right.
You know, we work with the customer, develop change approach and strategy, which then should be reviewed by what the business executives and agreed upon. But that's a small fraction, right, of what they do. So yes, they sign things, but they're not signing to commit. They're signing to pay. Right?
Yeah, I think that brings up the point. Like, so once they sign my charter, well, not my charter, you know, the next thing I do is I give them 3 days to digest the fact that they don't know what they signed, and then I give them the first task, which is we will together come up with a walking deck, elevator speech, single statement, choose your language, you know, it just doesn't matter. And they go like, well, what's that for? I go, that's what you're going to tell 100,000 people. And they go, what do you mean I'm going to tell 100,000 people that? I go like, that's what you signed up. Here's the charter, see line 6, that's what you do. Are other people doing stuff like that? Or am I just harsh? Maybe that's why
You're harsh, John.
I'm harsh.
It's
No,
both
I'm
and.
joyous. It's a joy in my heart. And I give them some onion soup, they're fine.
No, I think there's something to that. You need to give very specific, tactical, targeted direction to sponsors. The conceptual stuff only resonates so much, sinks in so much, I think. I think you're onto something, John.
Yeah, I'll actually send them a deck that we used and say, okay, we can modify this one. I think it's close enough, but it doesn't work at all. What are your thoughts? And give me 6 talking points and I'll create something pretty.
Yeah. So there's a question from Chris Campbell in the chat. What are the top barriers you see to clients effectively resourcing change management for projects? How have you coached them through it?
That's easy. The first one is funding. It's never funded. No, zero. You when I was in consulting, and just to level set, like when we go in now, we advise, we don't go in and do the execution from end to end anymore. But when I was in management consulting, when we led change, the one piece that we always said was add 30% to your implementation budget, and that would be to support the change, right? The materials, the resources, all of these things. Budget is number one. No, the change is never funded. I think the second is without budget, you're not going to have contractors, you're not going to hire people, et cetera, et cetera. I think the other barrier, and there probably isn't six, it really comes down to a couple. I think the second one is most, and I know it's funny saying this to you guys who are doing this every day, and some of you are, but most organizations do not have robust change management programs, and the ones that they do, they don't use them. I'm just being honest, right? And I've gone in and worked with, hey, we are a pro-site organization. Well, then this should be great for you. Right? And then you fail. And they're like, well, what about the pro side? Well, actually what we do is we promote pro side. We don't really have a change management team. So our managers can take the training, but they don't really use it. Yep. Right? Or whatever. Right. And so it really comes down to skills and capabilities. And like I mentioned earlier, you can't just pluck someone off the bench and say, here you go, you're our change leader. And one of the things I liked about John, and what I was going to say is, we actually work with customers. Also, part of our advisory is to develop an executive sponsorship program, right? Which creates a certain type of meetings and cadence with governance included. But what else do we need them to do to set expectations? The challenge with that is can we actually get them to do it? Right? So I know I didn't give you six, but
thanks. Tonya also added something in the chat. She just downloaded Atomic Habits earlier this week by James Clear. I haven't begun reading it yet, but it's meant to be about helping create tiny changes with remarkable results. I'm expecting it to help me set and maintain New Year's resolutions. Okay, Tonya, we're gonna hold you to it.
Yep, I thought it as Brett was asking about New Year's resolutions and Doreen was being very honest. I'm the same way. No, not my jam, but perhaps maybe a business book, just, beaten against my head will do the trick. So,
it's funny that, and I didn't even really think about bringing that up. So one of the concepts that we have been bringing up, and this is to me is something that I think, if you think about pro site changing or other, it is this philosophy of micro change. And it's how do we change in small bits and bites versus try to change in these big lumps. And I use that the same way as we talk about goal setting with our customers. It's how do we create these value milestones or change milestones throughout the overall journey that we can target and hit. And those little milestones will add up to a big outcome, right? But the way it actually is presented and feels is that the change or whatever that might be is much more consumable. But then again, you still have to have somebody to manage it, right?
Yes, very good. I saw somebody else with their hand up.
We need some good zingers, Emily. Come on.
Need zingers?
I'm kidding.
Careful what you ask for.
My job is to disrupt people for a living. I'm disrupting.
You're disrupting the disruptors. How
That's
is that?
exactly right.
I thought you said singers. I thought we were going to start our karaoke.
Yeah.
Oh,
Is
we do that too.
this the karaoke part of the program?
We do that too.
All right, Shannon, go ahead.
So when I'm working in change, I work in like long transformational change. So 1 year, 2 year programs. I usually steer clear of those opportunities where they call me in 3 months ahead of time. And I just be honest, we're going to fail. I'm going to fail. You're set up for failure, all the things. But one thing that I have found is it's all the non-sexy things that work, right? It's literally doing 80% of it consistently every single day and setting those expectations. I find that organizations have to kind of have a minimum level of maturity in order to grasp that. And I just wanted to ask, what's your experience? Because I find that those companies that are just constantly reactive and in constant firefighting mode, they're gonna get reactive results.
Exactly.
Those that are managed and maybe a little more repeatable can work on those existential, those higher level things that you were talking about, like culture transformation, adoption, things like that. I just, maybe some of your experiences on those things.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're spot on. I think we've also done a lot of overcomplication of change, and I think we've done that to try to appease this new generation of people by serving up, fun and quirky things instead of just really focusing on some of the basics, which is, what do they need to know? What do they need to do? And when do they need to do it? Right. And there was, and I'm even embarrassed to admit this, but I'm going to tell you a story anyways. So years ago, when I was in management consulting, I was doing a huge project for a rental car company that had a yellow logo. And I'm not going to tell you which one it is. But they were going through this massive transformation, and the overall program manager, this was people, process, technology, culture, site, it was massive. And the program manager said, there's only going to be one way this is going to be successful. And, and I had been in there probably 8 months, right? We did the strategy, right? We documented the processes. And he said, we just need to ram it down their throat. That's what he said. Literally, quick. Well, he actually said a different word, but I'm not going to repeat it. But we need to ram it down their throat. And I was sitting there going, like, how much money are you paying for us to manage your change? Right. And then I really started thinking about it. And not that I would ever recommend you ram it down their throat, but his point is keep it simple enough, right, for them to just be able to do it. And I think his point was, don't over-engineer the process. And the other thing is, I think what's funny about change too, is I find is, although we don't want to give them options, we give them options. Like, we ask them, we want you to change your expectations and do this, but really you could also kind of go over here and do it, or here and do it, and here and do it, but we don't really want you to do it, but we're not telling you, you know what I mean? And it's like, I was with a customer. This again, these stories I have are just completely baffling. This customer, I was talking this morning, and they said, well, we have this recruiting process and our end users aren't adopting our recruiting module, right? And I said, okay, well, tell me why. And they said, well, we just went through this, we're going through this massive hiring, and we hired this partner, and all of our managers are going right to the partner instead of using the recruiting process, right? And so my response is, well, did you tell the partner to make them go through the recruiting process? And it was like an epiphany. It was like, tell them they need to do this, right? Set expectations with them. Don't go around the process. This is the process. I think we do too much sugarcoating and not enough informing and reinforcing the process. This is the stuff I deal with every day. I laugh. I mean, I was talking to somebody else, and I say, sometimes I just have to walk away and I just chuckle how businesses even stay open. It just completely makes it's hilarious.
Yeah, it reminds me of it happens on almost every project. I'm a consultant as well, that I recommend, well, we need a town hall, a Q&A session with these people so that they generate awareness about this change coming. And we should say these things and this thing and this thing. And it never fails. There's always a sponsor or a leader who says, no, we can't say those things. Well, why not? Because then people will have questions. Well, that's the point,
Exactly.
So, it's like you have to make sponsors and leaders feel safe to start rattling that cage and saying, look, the world's going to change a little bit in these ways, and you're going to have questions, and that's okay. It's like, they have to get into that role rather than being reactive and fearing the reaction that people will have.
And I think you're exactly, I think most of them, it does come back to fear a lot of times. It's fear that I can't give my people an answer. And really that's an answer itself, is let me bring in somebody else to give you the answer.
Yeah, right.
But that's too hard.
It's hard. And if you don't do that, you're not used to doing that and reacting and engaging in that way. It feels weird. It feels wrong.
Yeah.
Someone else saw other raised hands. Just jump in.
So I guess I have two questions. One, it's with SAP, it sounds like if you don't get the commitment, are you really going to walk away from it? That's kind of half the question. Maybe I'm sugarcoating it. But the other one is, being SAP, we're doing it. We are now going to take this part of finance. They're going to go to SAP. It's in the 10-year plan, and now it's your turn. You ain't got a choice. I don't want to say you're cramming it down their throats. And that I was the one that laughed out loud. So thank you for the chuckle.
Yeah.
That was great. But do you ever use the club? I mean, I use an indirect. I have used indirect clubs, but SAP, you got a big club.
Yeah. So I'm going to answer your first question, and I'm so just because we sell it doesn't mean we always implement. So we have hundreds of partners out there, right? So
yep.
You've got one mindset, and now we're getting into sales philosophy.
That's okay.
Now we have some salespeople who I would say, listen, let me. Well, I'll just say that a lot of the way the cloud is working now is the compensation structure for salespeople is much different. So not only do they get commission on sales, they're now getting commission on sustainment and renewals and all of these other things. So now, which is a mindset shift in itself, as you can imagine. So we do have a lot of AEs who are like, I just don't think this customer's ready. What can we do to get them ready? Right. And then we help coach them and then we sell. Other ones are like, no, I'm just going to sell it and get the commission and move on and let somebody else deal with it.
Right.
So we are, I'm just being honest. So we are working with that, right? We are looking at how we can engage our customers to make sure that they're successful. But the funny thing is when customers ask us all the time, just tell me what I need to do.
Yep.
And my group has no problem telling people what to do. But when you get into the system implementation, there's so many ways to do things. And so this gets back to my point about options. Well, option A, you can do this, option B. And so I think, although we try to swing a bit of a club, I think the club becomes somewhat of a twig and it bends a little bit. It may sting a little bit besides really, create the impact that we're looking for.
Thank you.
But I agree with you. I've tried to coach our implementation team a lot. Listen, guys, you got to have a point of view. You got to be very clear. You got to direct this customer, because they don't know what they're doing. And it's not a negative comment. It's just, they don't know how to implement the solution. Right. So.
Thank you.
Sure.
Okay. I think we have time for one more question or insight. In the meantime, please tell us your experience. I'm hearing the Menti survey isn't working so well right now. Let's try this again.
Now it just showed up, Emily.
Oh,
Thank you.
is it working?
Yeah, 3 times it told me it wasn't active, but now it's there.
Ah, thank you. I
And
probably
this
forgot
is-
to share.
This is Jeannie. I just wanted to thank Brett for coming to our little Minnesota group and sharing his wisdom with us. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeannie. I appreciate it. And thanks for joining the ASA group as well. Very kind of you.
You called us little, Jeannie. We're big. We're giant.
Oh, well, sorry.
It was a term of endearment. I'm sorry.
Hey, all joking aside, though, I mentioned this earlier. I mean, thousands of customers are looking for this. I would encourage you, if you can make connections into the SAP ecosystem, whether it's with partners, whether it's with us, right? We refer people out. reach out. I mean, you can see who our customers are. We promote it every day, right? So we're not hiding this stuff. So, I'm just telling you, it's a huge need. Customers are desperate for it. So if you're looking for those types of opportunities, I would encourage you to do that.
Excellent. Please continue. Brett, thank you for taking the time, your insights, and it just kind of, I think it reinforces us to keep doing what we're doing, keep deepening our learning, leaning on each other for information, for insight, for support. Really excellent. Thank you for having us with you today.
Thank you for having me.
And as we kind of move into the next part of our event here, please keep the feedback coming.
Before
yes.
we let Brett go, I see Aaron put.
Yes, I was going to use that as our kind of our
I'm sorry.
segue.
I just wanted to make sure Brett didn't leave.
No, very good. So there's one more question for Brett, and let's continue that conversation. Would you like to read that question out?
Sure. Brett, how do you change the culture on non-financially driven organizations, nonprofit and government, for example?
How do you change the culture on nonprofit, non-government?
Nonprofit and government.
Oh, nonprofit and government. Well, I mentioned this earlier. I just joined this nonprofit community to give back, and it's actually one of the projects I'm about to embark on, is working with them on thinking through how to change their culture. I think everybody is driven on different things, and I think we have to find what those key drivers are that are going to want to have that organization make that shift. The challenge is getting everyone aligned to make the shift, and that comes back to, frankly, defining the value proposition that they need to have in order to the shift to be successful. So I honestly, I feel that change management, is very unique in industry and type and all of these things, but I think the concepts apply, right? I mean, it's, we work with thousands of customers of big shape, size, type, and I don't think the concepts are any different. I just think ultimately it comes down to, there's got to be a compelling event to make the change. People have to align on what that compelling event is. We've got to set expectations on how to drive that compelling event forward, and it's really up to them whether they're going to take it or not. If they don't take it, that's where they fail. If they do take it, that's where you're seeing success. But all you can do is reinforce. Continuously reinforce. I see dead silence.
That work for you, Aaron? Anything else on that?
Nope, sounds good. Thank you.
Okay, I will hand it off into the capable hands of Tonya Whitney, who will keep our party going, our change party, our recipe sharing, karaoke, whatever. Grab your favorite beverage and we'll continue the conversation.
Oh. And Brett, you are welcome to stay with us, but also we understand if you have to head on to a different pasture. But yeah, we typically use our final 30 minutes to really kind of do what you helped encourage in the last 20 to 30 minutes.
Okay, actually, I think my wife wanted me to go to dinner, so I actually might jump if you don't mind.
All right, we're just going to talk about you when you leave. It's good.
Perfect. That's fine. That's fine. I'm used to it. But I would say if there's anything you guys have questions about, don't hesitate to reach out. LinkedIn, email, whatever. I'm always available. Well, not always available, but I'll make myself available. So thank you guys.
Thank you, Brett.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Awesome. What a great event today. We typically use this last 30 minutes to continue the conversation, if that's where you guys want to take it, or it's been a wonderful way during this year of full virtual events to have kind of a fun networking. So please don't hesitate. I mean, I am still drinking my coffee from this morning, which that sounds probably gross, but if you have some other beverage, you are welcome to sip on that with all of us. I need to call my bartender. He hasn't brought my gin and tonic up yet. So Brett, or I mean, not Brett, Aaron, I know we got the conversation going. Does anybody else want to comment on the question related to nonprofits and so forth.
I put in the chat that I actually worked in the nonprofit world, and it really is dealing with mission. When I was working with children with disability, it's how do we increase our programming, and because of that, we changed how we looked at some funding with the Minnesota State Arts Board. With the American Cancer Society, it was how do we serve cancer patients, and we actually changed services when we merged with 4 states, and it was all missions based. And I did some volunteer work with the House of Charity for kind of a stopgap safety net for homeless people. And again, but it all goes back to the leadership. If you can't get the guy or the gal in charge to say, this is what I want, it ain't going to happen. I mean, it just doesn't happen. But it usually is done by mission. And nonprofits, they got a budget. And if they can save money, there is a lot of finance. I don't care if it's a church or a safety organization or whatever, education. I was talking to a guy with schools over in Minneapolis private school. Budget, holy moly! If he can save $100,000 a year, he'll do it. So it's finding out what there is and then tie it to the mission. That's what I found, Aaron. They don't like to talk about it because they don't want to spend the money. They don't want to spend the money.
Yeah, I was thinking more like on the sales end, right? So like, unfortunately, there's not like sales managers in nonprofits or government that like generate sale. I mean, it's different, grants and stuff, but I don't know. It seems completely different than just United Health Group or Seagate or whatever. So
a lot of fundraisers, ton of fundraisers.
Right.
There's and there's actually associations for grant writers and for those types of people. So. Is there a specific you have?
No, just
in general. Yeah. Anybody else has anything to offer, Aaron, as far as any nonprofit? I won't pick on Bonnie.
Well,
I'm super intrigued about them though.
What, Nancy?
Company, when it comes to changing, their challenges is like a regular company, it's budget, and they are even tighter on a budget.
Yes.
They are managing to the penny, right? So Aaron, maybe this might be an opportunity for you to look at a nonprofit who needs help with change management and to volunteer your expertise around change, right? It expands your experience. You can call it work experience, even if you're not getting paid for it. It is legit experience. You're helping them through a massive change, right? Because they need it as much as any for-profit business, except their budget is to the penny. And oftentimes, I think an opportunity to help with that will come if you are able to be a volunteer and to help them with that activity.
No, absolutely, Nancy. I found one actually. I went on to their meeting on Monday. I'm using their pen right now. It's Amplify Mission Network. So they connect business leaders with nonprofits. So it's kind of like a Shark Tank thing. That at the monthly meeting, there's 2 nonprofits that go in front of the business leaders, and then the business leaders, or you don't have to be a business leader, but the leaders kind of come alongside these individuals. So the one this week it's Lion Fire Pizza. It's like girls from the Minneapolis North volleyball team and their coach have this brick oven pizza trailer, and so they're looking to expand it, and it gives good jobs for women, with great leadership training. So it's super cool nonprofit that I stumbled across.
Great. And make sure you're capturing what you're doing and your involvement and take credit for it like it's a paid job. It can only enhance what your resume, your LinkedIn, and your experience provides for somebody.
It's funny how much we've been talking about nonprofits today and the potential of volunteering and so forth for the expertise we can bring, because when I was involved in another change management professional organization when I was in Texas, their professional development or our professional development committee, we're definitely not as robust as we have it here at Minnesota Change Management Network when it comes to ProSci type things, but one element they did do was to try to connect us as an organization to nonprofits or volunteer opportunities to use our expertise. So maybe we have something we could try here through our own network. So. Bonnie, did you want to say something else? I know you started to talk earlier.
Oh, I'm just super intrigued. I wasn't in the loop of what change management even was formally when I was involved with nonprofit work. I was in the communication space specifically, and I've thought about ways to engage, but I think what you guys have already articulated is very hard to think about even a budget for something like that. So opportunities for work in nonprofit usually do come with maybe there's a grant or some way that you can get involved that way, because it's not something that they're going to be able to spend money on. Not that they don't have money to worry about. Obviously, there are budgets for every company and every nonprofit. But super curious, I know a few people, someone in the Chicago area that does consulting for nonprofits exclusively. He's also a pastor. So I was very intrigued to learn more from what his work is in the Chicago area. He works with a variety of ministries and nonprofits in the area there. And it's very fulfilling personally for him, but it's also a dual career situation because of money. So.
And you bring up a good point. I think sometimes they don't want to talk to you because they already know the answer is no. You know, I mean, you got to get over that it's a both and to get a mindset to change like that can be difficult at best. So it's not even, well, I don't even have time to get you to volunteer because I don't have the time to monitor to figure out what I need. So yeah, so sometimes you got to go in the back door of the back door. Good points, Bonnie.
Well, let's see if we can shift back. Anything else from today's session that you all want to grapple with, or is there something else that's on someone's mind to have some fun for these next 20 minutes?
Are you still outside? I thought it was interesting that such a big company like SAP really understands the importance of people change, and they have people with a focus on it. You'd almost think they're so big they could say, if you don't do it, you'll fail. But clearly that wasn't the case.
And I can see why you'd say that, Nancy, but I have also seen, having worked in the Houston area, there are companies, and I'm sure it happens here in Minneapolis too, they would almost treat SAP like the flavor of the month. They deploy SAP 1 year for their whatevers, financials, inventory, whatever, and then pivot 2 years later to go to PeopleSoft or whatever the flavor was. But I don't even know if PeopleSoft is still a thing. I think they got eaten by one of the other groups, but you know what I mean? Yeah. So I guess they grapple with transformations that don't stick, perhaps, and things like that too. So yeah, it was interesting to hear that.
Yeah, should have maybe asked Brett if they do get feedback post implementation of, and rate how was it successful, yes or no? Was it, a technology issue or a people issue, or those kind of things going.
Well, actually, what I found interesting, Nancy, was as he introduced himself today, he was talking about, it isn't always about being the most technical resource in the room, right? His group that he oversees is about the stuff that a company should be thinking about before they implement something, right? The roles and responsibilities that will get affected by the change, the process mapping, the governance models, the whatever. I thought that was pretty interesting too. Yeah.
Agreed. That was the element of our industry. At Medtronic, I said we don't need another engineer. Well, we got plenty. But what we don't have is, and then I did what he said. Good points, Tony.
Yeah, I think a lot of times, right, in those big business system transformations, it truly becomes, company believes they're buying an IT implementation. They don't understand they're in the middle of a business transformation. So they don't take time to actually do the business transformation components, right? And that business transformation component really is a cross between the change piece on the human side and the change piece on the business side. And those things being so integrally tied, right? And instead they just look at the IT people like, well, what are you going to do? And I'm like, they should be doing what you're telling them they should be doing. What are you looking to them for, right? This is not a system implementation. It is a business transformation. So having implemented SAP several times, I can tell you that it is something that the business usually fails at.
And the level of transformation is dependent on how far off of standard process their current processes are. Because usually when you're implementing SAP or Oracle, you're going to, that standard, this is how we're going to do it. No customizations, very vanilla. That ASUG conference I attended, they talked a lot about, the more customizations you add in, then the higher your maintenance costs are going to be for years to come. So.
Absolutely. And the more likely the chance is that things will otherwise fail, right? Because the more twisted you make a standard process, systematically speaking, the more likely it is to fail just because it's going to, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I agree.
I don't mean to put you on the spot. Are there any tips or tricks to help how you help them see the transformation going from a simple transaction of swiping a business card to actually dealing with people, processes, and things?
Well, it's really interesting. So I used to work for Thomson Reuters, right? And that's where I did my first SAP implementation.
Yep.
When I worked with actually Ann Osby, who's on the call also. And then now I'm actually working for CHS.
Okay.
And CHS is very committed to trying to make sure that as they move from, they do have a partial SAP install up right now on ECC, which is the proprietary platform.
Right.
So you're running it on your own machines, right? And we're moving to S4, which is the cloud version of SAP, both on SuccessFactors, the HR piece that he was referring to, as well as the rest of S4 HANA. And I will say that I came in just as they were getting ready to start that work. And I was so refreshed to find out that they really were committed to figuring out how to transform as a business, not just how to implement systems or how to implement selected changes, but instead how to transform as a business. So they actually stood up both a change management methodology as well as lean at the same time, so that they had a process methodology to live by and they had a human process change methodology to live by. So it's awesome, right? Because they said, if we're going to do this, we're going to do it right. So I thought that was so cool, right? Because they really are trying to get to the cultural aspects of change, both at the human and the process level. But I do think that it's interesting. So CHS did not choose ProSci as their solution from a change management perspective. They actually selected Destra. And one of the things that I really like about Destra is that they have an equation that they use. Q times A equals E. And that has been so powerful to explain change management for me. So Q really is the quality. So it is about the systematic processes that you're putting up. So business system or processes that you're building or whatever it might be, but it is the thing that most people think is the whole thing, right? And you multiply that by A, which is whether your people are actually adopting and the extent to which they're adopting whatever your solution is. So it's not an additive, it's a multiplier. So the higher your multiplier on the people side of the change is, the higher your E, your effectiveness is going to be. So I thought that was just such a power, because I don't think people understand the difference between kind of the project management and the change management components of a project. And it's such an easy way to explain to somebody what's happening. So you can take 1 times 1 equals 1, or you can take 1 times 5 equals 5. you could have the same solution, but if you get everybody up and adopting, you've got your whole efficiency or effectiveness quotient moved up by just doing your change piece right, even if it's not the best solution in the whole world, right? So I love that piece of it. I think that is one thing in the Destra offering that I think is so powerful.
And Chris, I chose to look up Destra. I'm assuming it's based on Destra Consulting Group.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Methodology. Like, I'd never heard of it before.
Yeah, they have their ACT model.
Okay.
It's actually a pretty cool model, and it crosses between some of the regular change management pieces of ProSci, as well as they also focus very heavily on meeting facilitation and all of the things that actually it takes to get through those situations that are change management. So not just the change management pieces itself, but how do you kind of coach people through the processes and the conversations and everything else that gets you there.
And they've been working on change management for a long time. So they actually have governance and things like that. Our first president of MnCMN actually was a consultant there and worked very diligently to ensure that there was a governance piece to it. So
yeah.
So thanks for bringing. I forgot all about that. That model. It's a good model.
So, yeah, it's fun, and it's been kind of a great. It's a great thing to add to my ProSci piece, right? And I find myself using mixtures of both.
Yeah. And then some.
Yeah.
Thanks for explaining. Thanks for explaining that piece. So
yeah, I love that. Q times A equals E.
Times A equals E.
Where do you guys want to go with this, man? I got 9 minutes to just have some fun. Should we have John like eat this French onion soup in front of us to make us even more hungry? What should we do? For those of you that weren't here earlier, he had a whole, I think you're gonna have to share the recipe, John.
It's Julia Childs. It's very
like you do your own little special Minnesota twist.
Well, there's no, it's not Minnesota. I lived in Paris for a little bit, so it's all based in that. So, but we could talk about last night where I had Fresh Time had lamb T-bones on sale, and so I marinated with rosemary and oregano, garlic and such, and olive oil, and then grilled them on the grill for 5 and 5, and that was just unbelievable. If you like lamb, if you don't like lamb, it's a terrible meal. I love lamb.
Now I'm just hungry.
Yeah, really.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go have a bowl of cereal for dinner.
That sounds lovely. Put some onions on top, it'll be the same.
Right.
Use the cereal as croutons. Okay.
Add Gruyere like the French onion soup. It'll be awesome.
There you go.
Any other insights from tonight, you guys? Seriously?
I was thrilled though that he kept on going back to the commitment point that you got to get a sponsor, and then you have to coach them, continually coach them on what does that actually mean. I thought that was very helpful, and we forget.
Yeah.
Jeannie, how long was the talk that you heard him give?
I think it was maybe like 45 minutes to an hour. It seemed it was longer. And I have not worked on an SAP project. I just kind of stumbled across that SAP user group, and it was free. And it was while I was looking for my next contract. And it was a week long of free content. And some of the content was very, very technical, right? It was developers and architects talking about SAP, but there were definitely some OCM pieces to it. So I think I ended up tuning in to 7 or 8 sessions, and they were really great, but his was one that kind of stood out to me.
Right, awesome. I'm always hoping I can find little nuggets like that too. I still get the stuff from ProSci, of course, when they have the webinars, but it gets harder and harder to attend those when they're, Wednesday at 3 or something.
Yeah.
Hey, Nancy, were you on when I mentioned, because I'm trying to kind of dig back in a tiny bit related to ProSci, because it's been a very long time since I was certified, and my current client is really kind of leaning toward ProSci heavier. And they do have webinars right now related to some evolution of their methodology, and they don't just have it at 3 p.m. I'm going to take one next Wednesday, I think at 8 p.m. Central Time. So
Oh, okay.
that's how I'm going to
I
lean
haven't
into
even
3
looked
p.m.
that deeply at them recently because I've been so crazy busy.
Yeah.
That email just came out today.
Yes, it did.
Oh, okay.
And then
There's
also,
flexibility, that's cool.
yeah. And there is a paid course now that ProSci is doing it there. It's like a refresh. So I was certified in 2015, and the refresh course takes you through kind of all of the elements of how they've shaped things since then. And then the price of the course includes 1-year access to the new toolkit that they have.
cool.
So I thought it was a pretty good option.
That's good to hear, Janine, because I saw your post and I actually shared it with our, what's the committee's name? Professional development team, because I said, well, is this something that we could offer or at least amplify opportunities to take that refresher course?
Yeah, and it was one day. It was like 8 to 4. I think it was on a Friday. I don't know if they're all on Fridays. And you did have to like put a little thought into it ahead of time, have a project in mind for when you went through. And then they actually walked you through the toolkit, you know, for each of the pieces of your project, but it was just really quick, right? Like quick hits, nothing too bogged down or just to get you exposure to the whole thing. So I thought it was helpful.
Thank you.
Awesome.
So I guess next month we've got another guest speaker, and then we've got some fun that we're working on for later this year, really trying to assess readiness to potentially come back face to face for some of our events. So stay tuned for that, you guys. I feel like
anybody in the interior design space capabilities industry? Curious.
I know someone.
Because not only are people having to go through a change, right? A lot of spaces are going through.
Yes.
I see what you're saying. Got it. Yeah. In Houston, I know of a number of agencies that do real estate related people movement OCM, but I don't know the people or the groups that do that here in the Twin Cities or in Minnesota.
Just wondering how that's gonna look.
Right.
Nancy, I think that's
for a change too back into the office. Well, this is for the first time because I've been working in my role. I've never worked in the office, and so now I'm going to be preparing for actually doing that come September.
But Nancy, I think it's a good point. I talked to a couple of people who do some leading contract work, and I said, have you heard from clients saying now that people are coming back, you might have to set norms again, that you actually have to figure out how, when all of a sudden you have one person goes like, no, I can only come into the office now once a week, that they're not ostracized, that they're really part of the team, and what are the group norms and what does that look like and things of that nature.
Right.
And so far my response has been, well, that's really interesting. So I think they're going to do what Brett said, was cram it down their throats. So, which is pretty typical of a lot of management. So, but if you find some sensitive people, there was one company in St. Paul that I know, the insurance company, and I forget, Ceridian? No, not Ceridian.
Securian?
Yes, and they actually did focus groups and blah 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 and everything else. And they did it right. I was so impressed. And I think we have a couple of change people from there on the board, on our roster. So
Yeah.
The client I'm working with is doing a back to work project, but it's not a project I'm working on. But they're looking at bringing people back into the office and not having any assigned desks. And so you have to kind of like at Medtronic or Wells Fargo, you could sign up for your cubicle. But they're really encouraging people not to come into the office to just sit at a desk and work by themselves. They're encouraging people to use that office time in a more collaborative way with others on their team. So it'll be interesting to see how that goes down.
yeah, Be the Match did that before the pandemic. So
Nice. Well, guys, I'm seeing that it's basically time for us to end. What
All
I was
right.
trying to do a moment ago when I was talking about what's next with Minnesota Change Management Network is just to acknowledge that, you know, we are going to stay pretty virtual, but we're also going to be tapping into some opportunities to come together as well. We feel like from surveys and such, you know, we have had people coming to these events who might not normally have been able to if we had been face to face at our hotspots like Normandale, just out of client commitments or otherwise. Sometimes it's easier to hop on a virtual event than try to travel across the state or the cities or whatever. So anyway, do look for our organization to continue to be pretty creative in how we use our time that we get with you guys as our members. So Bonnie, anything else to say toward that? I don't want to commit to anything just yet. I just know that you guys have some fun ideas in play between programming and membership coming up. So.
Yes, we'll leave it to be a surprise still, but we're talking and it's exciting to talk about. I'm excited about it. So.
And we even have expertise within our membership that's going to be presenting some topics for us. We have something come up in September. I'm also going to wink to Chris Keller about some stuff. I'm not going to say any more than that. And thanks again, Jeannie, for making a recommendation, because if, you know, it's a great opportunity to get some important content in front of us when you've heard it from somewhere else, and we can bring that person to the rest of the change management group here and share some information. Is awesome, because, you know, sometimes it can feel a little bit of a grind to find topics and speakers to share with the network that's worth hearing, right? And it doesn't have to be the same thing all the time, and we don't want to present the same thing all the time. And there's a lot of things about the job you do in change management that's not just about, you know, how do I get feedback from people, or what the ADKAR model is telling me to do, or the equation says, right? It's a lot more than that. And just as a whole collective group, how can we present content that provides value to you? So that's what we're always looking to do. So thanks, Jeannie, again for making a recommendation.
Yeah, thanks for listening.
Thanks for being with us today, you guys, and we look forward to seeing you again in a few weeks. I hope that what you learned today will stick with you and you'll kind of ripple effect it into your work that you do. So have a good one, everybody. Thank you.
Thanks all.
Bye.